Hello and welcome. I'm Leigh-Ann Gerrans and you're watching W News Extra, broadcasting live from the Al Arabiya headquarters. These are our top stories. A controversial new aid distribution group backed by the US and Israel has begun working in Gaza. The British Prime Minister says the whole country stands with Liverpool after a car ploughed into a crowd during Liverpool's victory parade. As tensions remain high between New Delhi and Islamabad despite a recent ceasefire, we hear from a former minister of Pakistan. And the UK's Finance Ministry confirms to Al Arabiya News that Britain is nearing a trade deal with the GCC nations. Now, a controversial new aid distribution group backed by the US and Israel has begun working in Gaza. The Gaza Humanitarian Foundation says lorry loads of food have been delivered to secure sites. Its launch comes after the organisation's director, Jake Wood, resigned after expressing concerns over the group's independence and transparency. Meanwhile, US Special Envoy Steve Witkoff has told CNN that a ceasefire hostage deal for Gaza is currently on the table with a pathway to end the war. Earlier, I spoke to Dr. Jamal Nazal, spokesperson for Fatah, the Palestinian political faction that governs part of the West Bank. He told me his organisation doesn't have dealings with Hamas. Take a listen.
Well, Hamas doesn't consult with any other factions on what it is doing with the hostage issue. It should be doing this, especially with Fatah, especially with the Palestinian Liberation Organization, the PLO, the sole representative of the Palestinian people. Instead of this, Hamas is doing it all alone, achieving hardly any results. But there are no political talks now between Fatah and Hamas, because Hamas still rejects the idea of the two-state solution. It doesn't recognize the PLO as a as the sole legitimate representative of the Palestinian people, and it doesn't recognize the agreement signed between us and other world states. So that's why the dialogue between us and Hamas is going nowhere at this moment. The roadmap to a reconciliation leads us to certain steps that have to be taken, especially by Hamas. First of all, it has to understand and recognize international legitimacy. It has to recognize the idea of the Palestinian state. So I'm not very optimistic on reaching a common ground with Hamas because we do not share the same goals.
To discuss this and all of today's stories, I'm joined by Rawia Alami, senior presenter at Al Arabiya, and Al Arabiya journalist Wandi Ntengento. Thank you so much for both joining me this evening. Rawia, as you heard my conversation a little bit earlier, I was speaking to Dr. Jamal Nazal, the spokesperson for Fatah, but there have been real conflicting reports regarding the ceasefire proposal between Steve Witkoff and Hamas. Where are we right now with these conversations? Can you bring us up to date?
Indeed, there have been conflicting reports about this. Let me start with how this whole thing started. Yesterday, Reuters announced or said that Hamas has agreed to a ceasefire to release 10 hostages in two groups, basically, first 5 and then another 5. And that would be in exchange for a 70-day ceasefire. Now, after this announcement, we heard from the Americans who said no. Witkoff specifically said that this was not his proposal. This is not what's on the table. However, Witkoff later today, he did an interview with CNN, and he said that indeed there is a deal on the table. And basically it will ensure the release of half the hostages who are alive and half of the bodies of the dead hostages, basically. And that would be in exchange for a ceasefire, except he did not specify the duration of that ceasefire, compared to Hamas, who said 70 days yesterday. Also, Witkoff commented on what Hamas said, and he said again that this was not his proposal, that Hamas is yet to agree to this ceasefire deal. But what it seems is that the Americans, at least, if not the Israelis, the Americans aim to eventually have a permanent ceasefire, because the deal that Witkoff spoke about basically, as I said, ensures the release of half the hostages that are alive, half the bodies of those who are dead, and also it was talking about that after that, or during that ceasefire days, or those days, there will be negotiations as to a permanent ceasefire after that.
Yeah, absolutely. The details, obviously, we're still hearing about them, but Steve Witkoff is urging Hamas to agree to this deal. And another thing is it looks like there are talks happening. So that is something positive,
yes,
if we can take that away from it. But Wandi, I just wanted to speak to you a little bit about aid in the area. It's still a massive issue, and the people of Gaza are still desperate. What more do we know?
Oh, absolutely. Aid is still an issue, and the United Nations had said, obviously, the aid that had come through to Gaza is not enough. Actually, 500 to 600 trucks are needed, obviously trucks in aid to get into Gaza. This is a serious issue, because about 2.3 million people in Gaza are currently malnourished. And of course, we saw a GHF come in with around 8,000 boxes of food, much needed food, which really translates to about 460,000 meals. So more is needed. Obviously, we've seen that a site had been built up to keep this aid, and obviously to distribute it to people.
But tricky balance, isn't it? Getting aid in, distributed, obviously Israel and the US through this GFS system. It's a little bit more difficult.
A lot of, yes, I mean, a lot of the UN, first of all, as well as so many other humanitarian agencies, look with a lot of skepticism, to be honest, and they've expressed this skepticism about the GHF that is backed by Israel and by the United States to distribute this aid. Now, regardless whether 8,000 meals or boxes have been distributed, there is no footage actually to prove, you know, how was it distributed, and this is what is making the UN very skeptical about this. They have actually accused the organization of so many things. One of them is militarizing aid distribution, also possibly leading to Palestinian displacement, because they are specifying specific areas, mainly in the south, in Rafah, for these distribution, which means that massive numbers of the population has to move from the north, from the mid area to the south to get the aid. But I mean, there are so many issues with this as well, because if we look at even 500 or 600 trucks are not enough. If we look at numbers before the October 7th and before this war, we are talking, and by the way, the situation was not that great. I mean, it fluctuated over the years, in the past 20 years, since Hamas took over in 2007, with the lowest per month entering Gaza, about 2,020 trucks in 2008, sorry, which was at the time.
Yeah, we've actually got the graph on the screen there that can show
that graph,
when aid was distributed.
And that was the lowest in 2008. And if you look, the highest ever reaching number of trucks entering Gaza per month happened just before the war in August 2023. And it stood at over 12,000 trucks entering Gaza. And those were not considered enough at that time. Imagine what we're talking about. What is the number of aid that is needed? And that was before the war. There was not famine. There were food reserves. You know, people were not suffering as much as they're suffering now, while compared to what is needed now, I expect the need is even much, much greater than it was.
To add on to what you're saying, I think now the question is, as you've obviously mentioned what measures have been put in place to make sure that obviously food gets to, well, aid gets to where it needs to, go, and to make sure that the 2.3 million people who are being malnourished receive the aid that they need to receive. So what measures have been put in place, and also transparency when it comes to obviously the distribution of the aid. What we see as journalists, obviously through agencies and also on the ground, we see visuals of the trucks coming into obviously these sites that have been created. We do see people at certain areas in Gaza receiving cooked meals. But then obviously we don't have much information on obviously how many people have been given this aid. Yeah,
that's for sure. And not just that. I mean, I think this makes it a necessity for many humanitarian organizations to be involved. Definitely, the UN should be involved in this. Other, humanitarian agencies should be involved, and there should be a lot of distribution points, not just sort of areas in the south where people have to move. And if you remember, in January after the ceasefire, the epic scene of thousands of people marching from the south to the north, I don't think that this is, it's a scene we should be seeing the other way around. They're marching southwards to
because
get
most of
aid.
the aid is being distributed in the south
Yes.
at the moment, and there's the criticism that might be coming into why isn't it being distributed all over the country. But we must also remember one thing, that Israel's new ground offensive is still continuing.
They're preparing for an
inside
even bigger attack in the next few days. Yeah.
Which is, once again, another difficulty for the aid convoys coming in. But I definitely think that your points on this were really enlightening. Thank you so much. And I'm sure it's not the last time we'll be discussing this. Yeah, thank you very much. We're going to move on to another story making the headlines today. And the British Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, has said the whole country stands with Liverpool after a car collided with crowds during Liverpool FC's Premier League victory parade last night. 50 people were injured, including 4 children. 11 do remain in hospital. A 53-year-old white British man has been arrested on suspicion of attempted murder and also drug driving. Police are not treating it as terrorism. Here's more of what the UK Prime Minister had to say.
Well, scenes of joy turned to utter horror and devastation, and my thoughts and the thoughts of the whole country are with all of those that are affected, those injured, which of course includes children, their families, their friends, the whole community, Liverpool fans everywhere. And Liverpool stands together, and the whole country stands with Liverpool. I'd like to thank the first responders who did a fantastic job last night and continue to do so. There's now an ongoing investigation. I'm being kept updated, talking frequently to the Mayor, Steve Rotherham.
Earlier, I spoke to News UK correspondent Nick Ellaby, who's been reporting from the city of Liverpool. He gave me the latest on the suspect.
We know that the police have now been given an extra 24 hours to question him. He's the only person that's been detained. They're not looking for anybody else in relation to this incident. He's been arrested on suspicion of attempted murder, of dangerous driving, and also driving under the influence of drugs. We're expecting a charge probably tomorrow at this stage. And then in terms of the people injured, we know that at least 65 people, Leigh-Ann, were injured here on Water Street yesterday. 50 people went to hospital with those injuries, 4 different hospitals around Liverpool. We know that 4 children were among those injured, and fire crews told us that they arrived on the scene 4 minutes after the incident. They heard about the incident to find 4 people under a car. One of those people was a child. Now we know only 11 are still in hospital, and we're told, thankfully, that they are on the mend and recovering, and all of them in a stable condition. So we're waiting for some charges, really, on that man who continues to be questioned by police.
Wandi, it was horrific scenes that were coming out of Liverpool yesterday after the football club was having this big celebration through the city because they won the Premier League, and football is really just part of Liverpool's lifeline. we know how big football is in the UK. Just remind us of how this real tragic event unfolded.
And of course, I mean, it's been such a roller coaster of emotions, as you've mentioned. You know, people were very excited to witness, obviously, seeing this Premier League trophy. And it had been a long time since Liverpool had obviously celebrated this type of victory. So officials say around 1 million people had descended into this parade route. So you can imagine, of course, the excitement. You can imagine, well, of course, the excitement to see this trophy. And then just like that, tragedy happened. So it's been quite a tough time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that is a really good point to make, is it's families, it's children.
Yeah.
You know, football is a very family-friendly event, so it was completely frightening. And lots of eyewitnesses have come out and said, you know, we were absolutely petrified. We didn't know what was happening. But Rawia, sadly, car rammings actually have become something that we're a little bit more used to in many respects.
Yes, unfortunately we have. I mean, only in the past few months, let's say since November, I can remind you of 3 different incidents. For example, there was one on New Year's Eve in New Orleans where 14 people were killed and 57 were injured. And the suspect, or the culprit, basically, he was apparently a lone wolf after that's what the investigation said, and he was inspired by ISIS. But not all of them had any had sort of relations or connection with terrorism. If you remember the Christmas market in one of Germany's towns in this last Christmas in 2024, also there was another incident with a car ramming a crowd of people. The culprit was described by the police at the time as an Islamophobe, not connected to Islam, basically. He was an Islamophobe. And until now, no known motives basically were declared for what he's done. And also, if I can remind you of the China Sports Complex incident in November 24, where 35 people were killed, 43 were injured, and the suspect basically was unhappy apparently with his divorce settlement in court, and that's why that was his motive, to attack all of these people with his car. So there are so many different reasons why people would do this, and I think in the case of Liverpool, there are a lot of speculations about why he might have done it. It was very smart, I think, very intelligent from the British authorities to quickly announce that it has nothing to do with terrorism, to avoid hate crimes after that, Islamophobia, you know, a lot of violence that could
or nothing
have
to
happened.
Do with immigration.
And nothing to do with immigration,
Yeah, because
exactly.
I think Merseyside police were very, very conscious of that happening due to an incident that had happened previously at a school, at a Taylor Swift concert, that did cause a lot of speculation on social media. So as you say, Merseyside police reacting super quickly then, saying a 53-year-old man was arrested and he acted alone.
I mean, thinking about a country like China, the consequences for such is very harsh. I mean, the person that you just mentioned received a death sentence.
Yes.
So it's, I mean, the legal consequences are obviously very, very, very harsh in certain countries. Yeah.
Well, it depends if they have capital punishment or not. I suppose they don't have it in the UK, but well, definitely he will be, you know,
I think
tried and sentenced.
After this happens, I think it always raises questions about how you police an event like this, or how you police a Christmas market, or how you police a parade that's happening, because as we mentioned, there has been car rammings before, and I guess it's something that you can't even foresee happening. So it's quite difficult for the police. And I think yesterday when the Liverpool attack happened, it was really interesting to see the crowd getting involved, didn't they? And they sort of stopped the car from moving forward. But there's always so many questions about policing, but it must be extremely difficult.
It is. It must be very, very difficult. And not just that. I mean, who wants to go to a Christmas market or to a New Year's gathering, or even to celebrate, you know, a football league victory with, as if, you know, in an area, as if you're entering a military fortification, you know, with all the police being around. I mean, at the end of the day, we're talking about sort of people, families, children. They want to live normal lives. They want to be able to celebrate, you know, freely. But there is definitely a need for maybe finding ways to secure such, you know, such events. But I mean, also, so many of them are happening in every town, in every country. So I can imagine it will be quite a stretch for the security authorities, you know, for the police as well.
Absolutely. I think for me, obviously witnessing these type of events has increased my social anxiety. I have to kind of know how many people are going to be there, how big is the event before I go. And then obviously I have to think ahead. Should anything happen, I need to, if for an example I'm in an auditorium, I need to sit where, well, next to the exit, so that if anything happens, I am able to quickly get out of the situation.
This is an example of what such incidents would cause, you know, from psychological damage and people feel insecure and exposed, and probably, you know, will refrain from participating.
And I actually think that's
it's quite unfortunate.
I think that's an interesting point, because I would probably feel pretty similar, actually. No, I'd be cautious to go to these really big parades or something like that, because we were just talking about it, in a split second, everything can change and it can become very difficult. So, no, it's definitely.
Well, we're safe here in Dubai.
We are.
Yes, we are safe here in Dubai. But that was a really interesting conversation. And just once again, Merseyside Police did a news conference lately. They said a 53-year-old man remains in police custody. He was arrested on suspicion of attempted murder, dangerous driving and driving while unfit through drugs. So that is an update on that Liverpool car ramming that we saw yesterday. And let's move on right now, and we're going to go to another story. The UK's Finance Ministry has confirmed to Al Arabiya News that Britain is nearing a trade deal with the Gulf Cooperation Council nations, including Saudi Arabia, the UAE and Qatar. Chancellor Rachel Reeves said the Gulf Agreement would be the government's next deal after reaching trade pacts with India, the US and the EU. In an interview with Al Arabiya News senior correspondent Karina Camel, London's Lord Mayor Alistair King explained what a potential trade deal would mean for the British economy.
The UK Treasury has confirmed to Al Arabiya that the government is nearing a free trade deal with Gulf cooperation countries, and it is the next deal targeted by this government after a series of trade agreements with other parts of the world. How important would such a trade deal be for the British economy?
I think it would be enormously important. We have great trade relations with GCC countries. That's one of the reasons why I'm going to GCC very shortly for my next mayoral visit. But effectively, to get a free trade agreement, I think will be enormously important. We see tremendous opportunities to collaborate in investment both ways, both us investing into GCC countries and the other way around. And I think to have a free trade agreement that sets it all there, sets it all out sensibly, I think will be a great next step.
Talks between the United Kingdom and the Gulf countries over a trade deal have been ongoing for a number of years. Why do you think now might be the right moment to actually seal this deal, and could we see it this year?
Well, I think certainly in relation to those announcements, you know, we had a relatively recent change of government here in the United Kingdom. I think they had different trade priorities, different trade possibilities, areas where they wanted to concentrate on, and so therefore effectively we've had the change of personnel in negotiating some of those elements. Plus I think also that we're seeing extraordinary dislocate, or not, sort of rewiring of global trade that's gone on over the course of the last few months, and therefore I think it's important that we get some things like the free trade agreement between the GCC and the United Kingdom absolutely rock solid to provide a platform for business then to go off and develop from.
And in the ongoing trade discussions, can you give us a sense what sectors will be the focus of a potential trade agreement between the Gulf and the United Kingdom?
Well, the sectors I have a great interest in are obviously financial professional services, plus also legal services and maritime. And we're hopeful that there'll be a good services element to the free trade agreement. And certainly the indications are, look hopeful that there'll be some movement on those fronts.
So you're expecting this potential trade deal to include services as well as goods?
That's right. We certainly hope to have a service element to it. But I think there are good opportunities, those are the areas that I have a specialism in. But the areas you've talked about are particularly important as well.
And just looking at the wider relationship between the United Kingdom and Saudi Arabia, how important is that relationship for the British economy?
And the important thing is that during the course of my term, this will be my second visit to Saudi Arabia. I have a third one planned. For later in the year around the time of FII. And that's unprecedented for the Lord Mayor to go to any single country sort of 3 times. And so therefore I think it's just a commitment to the relationship that we're building with Saudi Arabia.
Now, the UK grocery store Tesco has announced it is installing security cameras above self-checkout tills in a bid to catch shoplifters. The VAR-type system uses AI to flag when an item is not being scanned correctly. It will then inform the customers to rescan. Oh, Rawia, I don't know. I don't know what I think of this.
What's wrong with the bar? I
just think, oh gosh, it's becoming a whole nanny state in my mind. But what do you make of this idea? And will it actually stop people from stealing from the supermarket?
I basically endorse it.
Okay.
I think it's a good idea. I definitely think it's a good idea. And I think that it will definitely bring down the number of shoplifting incidents in retailers, that's for sure. Remember when they introduced the scanners on the
Yes.
Sort of at the entrances of different retailers? I think that sort of lowered the shoplifting incidents by a lot.
Oh yeah, and then you had to put your receipt. Do you remember?
Yes.
So for the gates to open, that
Yes.
started happening in the UK. So it was annoying because you always had to get a receipt printed out.
That's
but that
true.
just shows that shoplifting, Wandi, is a huge problem, and they've been putting technology in to try and sort of stop this a bit.
You can put all the technology you want, but shoplifting is an economic, what is it?
It's an art.
Some
people
an art,
actually think of
but
it as an art.
it's really signs of the times.
It's related to, in many ways, I think in the UK, if we have a look at it, it's related to the fact that there has been a real crisis and price crunch. And people have been struggling when it comes to inflation, when it comes to changes within government policy, all of that.
Exactly. And just last month, food inflation went up by like 2.8%. So how is shoplifting going to stop if food prices are on the rise? But then, obviously, going back to like the numbers, there are about 20 million cases that have been reported around shoplifting. And this is really impacting businesses. I mean, businesses are losing, I think, around $1.8 billion US.
And we're talking about the UK as well.
The UK. And of course, this type of technology will help.
The thing is, the entire world is moving into innovation. And I think it is human nature to resist whatever we don't know or whatever we're not used to. And we have resisted a lot of sort of new technologies and new innovations in the past. And I think people will get used to it. I think eventually it's going to be better for not just retailers, for also customers, because I mean, who wants to? This way, they're going to get caught.
So many retailers have spoken out about just the volumes of money they are losing through theft, especially in the UK. Big department stores, when it comes to makeup, when it comes to clothing, you know, the likes of the big supermarket shops. And I just wonder right now, when you mentioned the cost of living crisis, and you said that backstage, you told me that the rise in shoplifting is mainly linked to the elderly people, which I found was really...
Which is really surprising, actually.
Pensioners. So, yeah, I was also quite surprised. Pensioners are... Well, there's a rising trend in pensioners who are shoplifting in the UK.
And that's because some of their benefits have been cut by the government.
Yeah.
Because we looked at the, they used to have the fuel allowance, so the government will help them pay for their energy, their heating to the homes for winter, which has been cut. So once again, there's been that crisis: do people heat their homes,
or do they eat,
or do they choose to eat?
Yeah.
So I do agree that in some ways putting cameras in is probably a good idea and will stop it, but is it also targeting the most vulnerable without a wider conversation being put in place? I don't know, just the counter argument.
Also, I mean, we are looking at it from a quite negative angle, that the only aim and objective of this VAR is to stop shoplifting. But it could also be helpful for people who are not shoplifting, who choose to use the self-checkout counters, basically, and are having trouble. And are having trouble with scanning some items, and therefore the VAR will sort of, guide them through it, or it will point out to them that some items have not been scanned properly. So I think it has, it has some benefits as well, not necessarily just when to do with shoplifting.
Oh no, of course, definitely. But I was just wondering if we know what is the most stolen items. I can't seem to find that anywhere. Anyone got any
razors, razor blades, packed meat,
cheese.
Apparently, cheese. People steal cheese.
Yeah.
Razor.
Yeah, because they're all usually put in refrigerators that customers have access to. So I think in the UK at some point there was like all of these items were put behind like specific sort of security or taking specific security measures to prevent shoplifting from these refrigerators.
I'm still surprised by razors. I mean, why?
Because they're so expensive, razor blades.
They are expensive.
They're really expensive. And once again, cheese is expensive, meat is expensive. And gosh, that's really interesting. And apparently batteries too. Batteries are expensive.
And not just that, I mean, razors and batteries are relatively small items. They're easier to hide as well. Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And obviously, we would never ever condone shoplifting. So it is good all these measures have come into place within these big supermarkets, technology making our life easier. But I do always wonder, is this tied into the cost of living crisis? And as you mentioned, with the pensioners.
It appears so, yes.
Yeah. And we're going to move on to the favourite part of my show, actually. And finally, Rawia and Wandi, you've come up with a couple of quirky stories of the day. So they did their homework for me. And I really like Wandi's story because I've always wondered, I don't know why, does space have a smell? That is actually a question I've often asked myself.
It must do, but we won't be able to smell it.
No, but apparently Wandi can tell us about the scent of space.
Yeah, apparently it does. So a London-based PhD researcher who happens to be a perfume maker, who is also a PhD researcher in astrobiology, is basically trying to find out how space smells. And she's making these perfumes that smell like the moon, Jupiter and Mars.
Okay.
And what really throws me off is the scent.
what kind of scent that comes out of the moon.
I
for
like the
example.
idea of this, though.
Do you want to
it's
smell like the
interesting,
moon?
definitely.
What does the moon
Depends
smell
what the
like?
moon smells like, actually.
I mean, from what you know, she says here, the moon smells like charcoal. I think I guessed that part. Charcoal with a hint of egg sulfur.
Oh,
So, like,
gosh.
you remember the stink bombs?
terrible.
You used to
Exactly,
let off
that's
at
a stink
school?
bomb.
It's basically like a stink bomb in
It
a
is
bottle.
stink bomb.
Yeah, and Mars has been described to smell chalky with a rich undertone of blood.
Oh,
So that's like a metallic-y.
Yes.
That's like more a metallic-y smell,
Yes.
isn't it?
I don't imagine myself walking around smelling like
or wanting
No.
to smell this. I suppose, I mean, the smell is derived from the actual sort of, you know, factors or whatever the different elements that are
Around the
present
atmosphere.
exactly in the
Yeah.
atmosphere of the moon or Jupiter or any of these planets.
And the one that obviously really throws me off is the smell of, I think it's, Jupiter.
Because it's...
It smells like cat urine.
Oh, gosh. That's terrible. I don't want to smell it.
Do you want to walk around smelling like cat
Definitely not.
urine?
Definitely not.
Do you know what?
I don't want to use it and I don't want to smell it on anybody else either.
This is a very interesting venture. And it will cost you anything between, I think, 80 to 85 pounds.
Oh my goodness, and
smell
that's very
like cat
expensive.
urine.
But you know, I think
I don't think they're going to have many customers, to be honest.
But we say that, but space, my gosh, it's just become a thing again lately, hasn't
Right?
it?
It has.
We've seen all the celebrities. Remember, they went up. Katy
The
Perry,
ladies, yes.
You know, they all went up on.
Even though it was controversial whether
yes,
it actually did or not.
if they went up, yes,
Yep.
past the common line. But space, and then Elon Musk, he's launching, all these satellites, and we're seeing rockets going off all the time. I don't think space has ever been so fashionable as it is now for a really long time. So maybe people are going to spend £80 to smell
Like space.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know, just a crazy thought. But space, maybe she's tapping into something here that we're missing.
I mean,
I don't know. I mean, chalk is okay, but the cat urine, no.
No.
I don't think so.
Maybe
And stink bombs, no.
No, absolutely not, yeah.
But once again, like a super interesting conversation. And once again, space. I feel like we love talking about space. And Rawia, you've got one for us too. And
Yes.
this is all about like voice noting on your mobile phone. And apparently we're just over it. Are we over it? Are we
Well, no, I don't think we're over it, actually, even though we're talking about this study or a survey, basically, that shows that in the UK, people are experiencing voice note fatigue, or that's what they've called it. Apparently, 62% claim that they experience this, that they are fed up with these voice notes, especially when they are very long. And they're saying that 44% are listening to those voice notes on double speed, which is extremely annoying,
But
by the way.
I feel like the people who listen to them on double speed are always men. I don't know why I've just singled out men. Do you do it?
I
Wandi?
am guilty of that.
Oh, she's guilty?
Yeah,
On
I'll put it ×2. I mean,
Oh my God! How do you understand what the
understand
person is saying, or their sort of the context and their because you can hear people's feelings through their voice, and when you're hearing it on double speed, it's very strange. Anyways, I mean, there's a lot of different percentages that came out of this study. Apparently, 14% of people who have been surveyed, they want these voice notes banned, and we're talking about the UK here, while 73% have admitted that they love recording them. One thing is for sure, I think, that humans are becoming definitely busier, certainly lazier, and extremely, definitely, they are becoming impatient.
I think if you enjoy recording voice notes, start a podcast. Okay?
No, I mean, we're talking...
Start a
It
podcast.
doesn't need to be a 5-minute voice note. I think they should keep it under, like, 1 minute or under 2
seconds.
minutes, 30 seconds, something like
Use and
this.
brief.
Seriously, because definitely, I think we all suffer from this impatience where we can read long, but it's hard to listen for long.
But sometimes I wonder, because I don't voice note very much. It's not something that I do too often. I don't really use it. You use it quite a bit.
It's much easier, Leigh-Ann. It's much easier. It's more practical. You can do it while you're walking. You can do it in the car.
Yeah, absolutely. But I do find that because we all live away from our families, we're in different time zones. I think that's where voice notes are really important, because you can have really lovely conversations with your friends. You might not be in the time zone, but you can update each other on the ongoings of life, and you can hear your parents' voice or your friend's voice, which I always think is
very
something
heartwarming.
that's really positive.
Yes. Actually, according to the survey, 68% said that they look at it as a phone call without the pressure.
Yeah.
Which is really nice. I mean, I think more. I think the communication is clearer, at least from my point of view.
That's a different perspective
when it comes to voice notes. However, I think one of its shortcomings is that you cannot use it as a reference. You know how you go back to your old messages to check some information?
Yeah.
It's hard to do that with voice notes. You wouldn't know which voice note sort of had the information that you're looking for. If you found the voice note, you have to listen to it all to get the information. This is one of its shortcomings. But apart from that, especially when you live away from family, you live away from loved ones, I think it's a great way to connect and still feel, you know, the human touch of it, because you're listening to people's voices and emotions through those voies.
No, very true. I'll send you a voice note later.
Good.
To thank you for being... Yeah, it's something I never ever use, but good points there. Rawia and Wandi, thank you so much. Today's guests joining me, Rawia and Wandi. Once again, thank you so much for joining us. And that's all from us on W News Extra. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and also follow us on X. GNT with Tom Burgess-Watson is coming up next. Goodbye and thank you for watching.